Well, after last week's promising direction, we have reminded how sloppy and unfocused the show is with this episode. Hey guys, it's Cameron for Fear the Walking Dead, Season 2, Episode 12, Pillar of Salt, and I was definitely looking forward to this episode. Like I said, last week's episode, I think, put the show in a really hopeful direction, and I was really hoping that they would stay consistent with that direction. I really liked where we were headed last week, and it really seemed like things were really starting to come together. But I have to say that not only was this episode a step back, this was by far the messiest episode we have had of the season, since we've come back. Really, this is everything I hate about this show is how messy it is. I thought that there was way too much going on this episode, and overall was just so unfocused. I could not tell what they were doing really with this episode, but let's just get into it, because like I said, I really, as you could tell, was not a fan of it, and I didn't hate it by any means, but it really was very messy, and especially the opening. The opening of this episode I thought was interesting, but just really shows my main complaint here. We start at La Colonia, and a man is sneaking around with a backpack on. He's calling this woman and the young girl to follow him as the guard in the tower sleeps. They continue their way through past a crying little girl and sleeping older man. They ultimately find this hole in the fence to sneak through. The man reminds his daughter how important it is they stay calm before the trio head out into the street toward the fenced-in walkers. They open the school bus doors and head to the back of the bus. The man then kicks the door to attract a walker, quickly kills it while his wife closes the door, slices its stomach open, and covers himself in its blood before hanging out to the walker pit carefully with a knife drawn. And once he sees it, he is blending in. He signals for his family to follow. Now, who his family is, I don't know, but the family continues now past the walker pit. The young girl questions how much further they have to go, and the father insists that it's not too far. A truck then starts pulling up behind them. The father's scared. It's actually gangsters, and the leader has a gun drawn. He starts questioning the father, who won't answer anything, and the man turns his attention to the young girl, which prompts the father to hand over his backpack. The gangster realizes he knows the man, starts asking where his oxy is, but the man insists they have left La Colonia. The gangster doesn't believe him, pushes him back towards the community, and I have no idea what was going on this first scene. I understand it's supposed to be confusing, but it just really shows the main problem. We go in this very strange direction with La Colonia that I really was not a fan of, but we'll get into that. Then we get to what I think this episode should have focused on. We find Ophelia driving the pickup truck by herself, and I'm like, alright, finally we're picking up with Ophelia, we're going to see what she's up to, and she parks and grabs a hammer from the toolbox in the back. Reluctantly, she heads into what used to be a restaurant, and inside she bashes a walker's head. She continues to the back where she stares out into the ocean before a flashback starts, and I'm like, alright, I guess the majority of this episode is going to be like the Nick episode, where we focus on Ophelia lots. And we do to an extent, but just like Nick, these flashbacks don't really reveal much about her character, and I think Nick's definitely they're starting to. Ophelia's, I don't really think they did much of anything for her character in this episode. We see it's the same restaurant. Ophelia sits with her once fiancé for dinner. He's moving to Santa Fe for a new job. He invites her with him, but she insists she can't do that. A glass then hits the table. It has an engagement ring inside, and she insists that New Mexico is too far. He knows that she's reluctant because of her parents, and he's willing to ask them. She doesn't think it's a good idea, but she'll talk to her mother. And again, I just didn't really understand what the point of the scene was. It's to show that she's still grieving over her mother, or that her life used to be better. I really couldn't tell, but back in real time, she siphons gas from a truck, and literally we do not see her till much later into the episode, and this kind of pissed me off. I really wanted to see an Ophelia-centric episode, because I feel like out of all the characters, Ophelia is the one that we have the most, unknown status with. We really don't know. We really even have much of an arc with Ophelia. She's been the most underutilized character this entire show, and even in this episode, she's underutilized. And again, this really shows the main problem, is that this episode lacks focus. We really don't have much of a focus going on in this episode, and everything going on just isn't that interesting. So into one of the community farms, and at the hotel, Madison and Elena try to start the generator, and do. Stranda makes drinks at the bar, cheers to Thomas, and on the pier, Oscar and others are catching fish. and we see on the beach, Alycia's getting serving lessons from Hector. There she, if you laugh, starts talking about Nick. He was always the crazy one. Her mom would always have to keep up with them. Hector asks where he is now, but of course she doesn't really know, though she insists he is out there. She asks about Hector's brother, and he reveals that he died, and Madison happily hustles up with some cold drinks. They're all excited to actually have ice, because they haven't had ice in a while, and I thought that was interesting to see, definitely, and I like seeing them, use this hotel. I like seeing the hotel working out for them. But then we go to Intuana, and we go in this very strange direction with Tuana in this episode. I really thought that we were going in a much different direction. The direction we go here is not the direction I think the show should have gone in. Luciana wakes up shirtless in Nick's bed to knock at the door. A man tells Luciana that Francisco deserted them, and Nick volunteers himself and Luciana to go after him. So I really liked how last week we focused on Luciana and Nick, and how Luciana really was supposed to be the one for Nick to talk to and actually help him out. But we barely even focused on this episode. We focused on this ridiculous storyline, and I just thought it was completely unnecessary for the episode to do. And that really is my problem with this episode, is that the show seemed like it was going in this character-driven direction. We were really going to develop these characters more, but instead they decided to go in this direction where we just have really weird stuff going on just to add conflict, and I think that's the worst type of thing that this show does. It just does things to add conflict, and I think this episode is the perfect example of that. Especially with this next scene. We see at the hotel, Madison, Elena, Strand, Alycia make survival plans. A knock on the door is answered by Strand. The bride's mother just stabs him right then and there, and saying that, he killed their daughter and everything. The woman runs off as Strand collapses, and you obviously know Strand's not going to die. I mean, I didn't think Strand was going to die. It was too early in the episode. I did not think that was going to happen. The group tends to Strand in the room. Oscar comes to try and help. The woman's family tries to vouch for her. The group starts arguing that Madison insisted they take care of Strand right now. Now, I did think this was an interesting conflict for what they really need to do, but I felt that this was just very unfocused. I wanted to see Madison, Strand, and Alycia try to run this hotel. I really want to see it succeed, but already it seems like it's failing, and that's something that the Fear the Walking Dead has a lot of problems with, is that it always seems like they set stuff up, but they try to do things too much too fast, and I think this is the perfect example of that. He tries to divert his attention by talking about scotch. Oscar lists everything he needs, writes it down for Madison. Elena reveals a place which will have the supplies, but it's too far away. And we see that in Tijuana, Alejandro approaches Nick and Luciana. He asks what happened, and they tell him about Francisco. Luciana says the community needs to hear from Alejandro, and he rebuttals by saying that the scouts need to hear hers. So we don't really know what's going on there, and Strand's hopeful recovery continues. All he wants is more drinks, we see. He goes on to insist that she needs to be watched forever, and Madison says things would only get worse if she exiles her. She rules that Elena stays locked up indefinitely, and if anyone raises a hand to another, they're exiled, and everyone agrees. And I think that definitely does make sense. I mean, if anyone betrays them, they should just be exiled, because they want to get along, and the only way this is going to work is if they work together. So I thought that definitely did make sense. But again, it kind of shows that this whole thing really wasn't that necessary that we really went to, which I'll talk about. But Alejandro speaks to the group. He expresses his sorrow for those who have lost their faith, because that's what's beyond the wall is far worse than anyone can imagine. He insists that death will not take them if they stand together. They have to have faith and stand strong with him, and Alejandro doesn't look to be feeling well. Luciana says he's okay. The group leaves and the three talk privately. Alejandro wants Luciana to talk to the scouts immediately, and then questions whether or not she wishes to follow Francisco, and she's insulted by this, obviously. He tells her once more to speak to the scouts and that nobody leaves La Colonia until he says differently. So he's the one that controls it all of a sudden, and this just felt like a major retraction from what they did with Alejandro last week, because last week it seemed like Alejandro, we were going to focus on, does he really have this bite? Can Luciana really heal people? And we don't even focus on that here. All the interesting stuff they gave us last week, we don't focus on. We instead focus on this ridiculous thing with the scouts and how Alejandro wants to be in power, and it just really seemed like it was a step back, and again, just something to create conflict, and I don't really know why the show went in this direction. I would have much rather seen more going on with this drug storyline, with them trying to turn these drugs into a good thing, and seeing if Luciana really can heal people. I really want to see them go in that direction. I really was kind of disappointed that they didn't do that here. So Madison preps to go out for the medical supplies. Hector and Elena argue before the two women get in a truck and drive off. Later, Madison asks Elena what the fight with Hector was all about, and he was worried about her. They lost Antonio, and Hector won't forgive her for that, and Madison tells her not to give up on him. As we know, Hector blames Elena for what's going on. I don't really know, but I did like seeing that Madison is trying to help out Elena. I like seeing that overall, and I do like seeing Madison as a leader. I like seeing her actually knowing what's going on. I like seeing her not be the one to cause problems. I like seeing her, be the one to be kind of helping this community thrive and trying to keep things together, but you can already tell they're kind of failing, and that's the thing. It's kind of hard to root for this hotel when you can already tell that they're kind of failing in the sense, and I don't really like seeing that. I like seeing something succeed than rather see it fail. It's just not that interesting to see, and I've talked about this before. It's much more interesting to see someone start out something roughly and then build on from it than see someone just decreasingly fail. It's just not interesting to see, and I think already it's kind of getting, I'm already kind of losing this storyline. So Nick and Luciana argue about Alejandro. Nick insists that they deliver the oxy. Luciana insists that Alejandro knows what he's doing, and the two argue, which concludes in Nick saying that he is only here for her. Luciana declares that she's the boss now before a kiss, and again, they're just arguing back and forth. Don't really know if they can trust Alejandro. And Madison, Elena, and a member of Hector's group arrive at the supermarket with a trade for the armed men outside. Madison and Elena then head inside, and Nick goes to Alejandro's home alone. He asks if he's okay. Alejandro reveals a bit of regret for doubting Luciana, and Nick insists that the gangsters will come for them if they don't make a trade. And Alejandro plays, but Nick claims to believe in this community and want what is best for it. And Alejandro starts to say that they don't have faith in him. He hands Nick a water bottle, which seems like a dismissal. And I don't know why they're so concerned about these gangsters all of a sudden. I mean, if they would have set this up 2 episodes ago, then yeah, this would have been interesting. But they just set this up now. Why all of a sudden are we worried about these gangsters? La Colonia is supposed to be a safe haven. It's supposed to be a place where there are no walkers and there are no problems. Why all of a sudden is this threat out here? Just seems kind of like it's out of left field, and it seems like it's just there to create this conflict and gets to not really trust Alejandro, when literally all last week's episode was about us trying to get behind Alejandro and get behind this whole thing with the cure. They had me get behind that, and now they're doing this, and again, I really was loving the storyline, but after this episode, I don't really know if I'm as into it anymore. I want them to focus on the interesting stuff, but they're just not, and that's the real problem with this episode, that they take all the interesting stuff and focus on stuff that's just not all that interesting. So Madison and Elena then present their cooler to Antonio. Madison presents the list of supplies they need. Antonio's most excited about the ice and says they'll want more, and Elena reveals that Antonio asked about him but not why he didn't come. So upstairs, Marco's questioning Francisco. Elena translates it to Madison, describes Luciana and Nick, which prompts Madison to get involved, and I like that they are starting to connect things together. I like that Elena does know of Luciana and Nick. Now, how she does, I don't know. But we know this is all going to come back together at some point, and I'm looking forward to seeing where that goes. So Madison bursts into the room, asks if they're talking about Nick, but she's quickly taken out of the room because she thinks she knows that, holy shit, my son could actually be alive. And Antonio then tells Elena not to come back because they won't be there too much longer, and gives her the supplies. So Nick talks to the man in the community and asks if he would make the drops with him instead of Antonio. The man wants to follow Alejandro's orders, but Nick realizes that more people in their group will in fact die, and someone was watching, and the man agrees to go with Nick. We don't know who was watching, but Nick walks over to Luciana, who is just finishing her talk with the scouts, and they leave, and she explains what she said to them. The community needs their strength. They joke about Nick lying in Spanish, which he is, because he's not telling about making the drop, and the two go inside for a drink of water, and I'm just not really into this whole Nick not telling the truth to Luciana, and him not trusting her. It just goes against what we were trying to do last week. It seemed like Luciana was going to be Nick's savior, and already it seems like these two are clashing, and it just, again, is creating conflict to something that really isn't all that developed yet. And he mentally prepared himself for the drop. He sees Marco looking at him with a pair of binoculars, and Ophelia then looks at this map before observing a pair of rosary beads, and in the flashback, Ophelia wears the beads as she walks into her house to talk to her mother. They talk about the busy weekend for business. Griselda tells her that they came here for Ophelia and made a lot of dark choices and sacrifices to do so. Ophelia feels guilty for Griselda continues to trust that they would have done anything for her, and she feels that she's kind of the source of the problem. And real time, we see Ophelia kisses the rosary, hangs it from the rear view mirror, and kisses, and drives off toward the U.S., and I don't know what the point of really all this was. I mean, I really wanted to get more into Ophelia's backstory and see more with her, because again, she's the most undeveloped character on this show. But again, they only gave her a little bit of stuff to do. It was very underutilized, and I really think they should be utilizing her differently. She is a main character on the show, and she always feels background, and I honestly forget she's here sometimes, and I really want to see him develop Ophelia more. Marco was a really interesting character, and I think they could have done a lot more with Ophelia, but of course they didn't develop her, and I really want to see them, do more with Ophelia, because I think she would have been a lot more not Marco, but I forget his name now, but her father. I really would want to see them do more with Ophelia, but they're just not right now, and I really wish, honestly, this entire episode was just in Ophelia's perspective. I think it would have made a lot more sense, would have been a lot less messy, and I wouldn't have as many complaints as I did with this episode. So Madison pulls up to the hotel with the supplies. They rush to Strand. The hotel lights come on. Alycia and Elena talk about Madison almost blowing the trade. Alycia runs up to Madison, tells her to shut the lights. Madison says the boy Francisco was describing had to be Nick. She knows that Nick is alive, and Alycia insists that she never left Madison, questions why that isn't enough, and already it seems like Alycia and Madison are clashing, and Madison now suddenly wants to go after Nick. I really don't know what's going on there. And then we get this very bizarre ending where all of a sudden we see Travis in the distance. He sees the light as it goes out. He starts to walk towards it, and it seems as if he's going to end up in the same place that Madison is, and it kind of makes us think that maybe Chris is gone or doesn't want anything to do with Chris. But that's how this episode ends overall, and let's just get into this mess overall, because there really is a lot to talk about. This, to me, is the perfect example of what Fear is having a real problem with. I think they really made it seem like Fear was focusing more on the characters, and that it was going to be a more character-driven show. That's what it should be. It doesn't need all this action. It doesn't need all these crazy plot twists. And that's the problem with this episode, is that they just ended a bunch of stuff before it actually began. The hotel already seems to be not much of a concern. I thought that a lot of this was going to be seeing if Madison, Alycia, and Strand can run this hotel and actually create this safe haven, but now it seems like now she's focused on finding Nick, and now she knows that Nick's alive, and she wants to go see where he is, and that to me is just not as interesting. And yes, I know we only have 3 episodes left, 2 episodes left before the finale, but I'm just kind of pissed off. I really want to see it go in this different direction, and they didn't do that. I'm pretty sure that Chris is dead, because Travis is now on his own. Chris is either dead or Travis has just left him. I'm willing to bet that Chris probably died, and I hope he did, because he's like the worst character on the show right now. So maybe Travis is going to meet up with Madison and Alycia. I think that's probably what's going to happen, but we'll have to see. Ophelia, I don't know why they didn't just give her own episode. They did it with Nick. They very well were able to develop his character. It was one of the best episodes the show has done, and I feel they could have done it even better with Ophelia, a character we don't know a ton about. They could have had the perfect opportunity to just make an entire episode focused on her, but no, they didn't do that, and I really don't know why they didn't do that. It really pissed me off that they did that. I thought that she was going to look for her father, which I'm blanking on his name. I don't know why, but I'm blanking on his name right now. I thought that she was going to go to look for him, but again, it seems like they're kind of forgetting about him and that he clearly is dead. I don't know if we're ever going to see him again, but we'll have to see what happens with that. Nick and Luciana, I don't like where this is going. I really thought this was going to be that they were going to focus on, is Luciana really the savior? Is she someone that can really save these people? That is a very compelling storyline. That's something I can really get behind. This whole thing with the oxy and the drop, I'm just not into anymore, and I really want to like the storyline. I really was loving this storyline, but if they're going to do something like this, where it's just getting Nick and Luciana to turn against each other, make Luciana pointless, and somehow just get her away from all this, then I'm going to be really pissed off. I really love the dynamic overall. I think they work very well together, and I want to see more of La Colonia. I don't just want to see it fail. I want to see more happen to it, but again, I think it's really dumb. I don't really like the direction they took that. Strand being hurt, I knew obviously Strand was going to be okay by the end of the episode. A lot of this episode was just randomness, really. That's the thing with this episode. It was very random, it was very messy, and it just really wasn't that focused. It's the worst kind of Fear the Walking Dead episode. Fear the Walking Dead, like I said, is best when they focus on characters and really try to go in depth with their histories and just don't focus on a ton of action. And this episode did way too much too soon. I'm so confused what's going on. This episode was very maddening. It was just jumping from plot to plot to plot. It wasn't at all structured, and it wasn't structured. Like, this episode was not structured in any way. It wasn't edited well. I just really was not a fan of this episode. One of the worst episodes the show has given us by far. And like I said, I think the worst kind of episode we've had. I really hope that the show gets back on track, because if they keep giving me episodes like this, I really might be leaving the show soon. But again, I'm not going to end. I'm going to watch the last 3 episodes of the season, because there's only 3 episodes left. I made this far. Why not? There's only 3 left. But if the show doesn't get its act together by the end of this season, I might just ditch it altogether, because the show just really is not doing what I wanted to do. I really thought we were heading in a much different direction than we were, and I was really disappointed to see what the show gave me this week. But either way, guys, I know you guys saw this episode. Not really a fan of this one at all. I really wanted to like it a lot more. I really like where we were headed, but it just seemed like they ditched everything that was interesting about every single storyline from last week, and they left us with a blank slate and did the complete opposite of what I wanted them to do, and really just killed what could have been some very potentially very interesting and compelling storylines, and just kind of ended them before they started, which really did piss me off. And I know they only have a certain amount of episodes, but that's why I really think they should be doing more episodes next season. I don't know if 15 was enough. They could have maybe had an extra one. They could have developed this hotel plot a little bit more, but no, they didn't want to do that for some reason. But that's my review. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you guys thought of this episode, and I will see you guys in my next video, which will be, I think, for the series premiere of Kevin Can Wait, the new CBS show, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.